Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today we have another incredible guest from the other side of the United States, sort of. I mean, maybe it's central. Depends on what side of Kentucky. No, you say it's still east. Anyway, Scott Drake, he's a founder and executive director of JumpCoach, which is a social enterprise to help people really reach their mission as fast as possible. He's been rising through the ranks of leadership in many different areas and then helping other people become better leaders in their own teams. And one of the reasons that I agreed to have him on the show is because I think we can always benefit from more leadership and understanding how to become better leaders, especially in the area of legacy. If we're going to really have a legacy, one of the elements of having a legacy or being remembered the way we want to be remembered is making sure that other people feel that impact in the way that we want them to feel that. And that starts with leadership. It starts with becoming the person that you actually want people to remember you by. So I'm super excited to have you on. He's got lots of things we're going to talk about today. But go ahead, Scott, and tell us, where did you start? Where did you start your journey? How did you get to where you are? And why are you so passionate about helping people become better leaders in whatever their goal is?
Yeah, Sam, thanks so much for having me on. I guess to kind of understand me and my entrepreneurial journey and just some of those things. I mean, I've kind of been that entrepreneur since I was a kid. My dad told me a story about 2 months ago I totally forgot about, where when I was 10, we lived on a small farm in Kentucky. And I talked my dad into letting me put in about a half an acre of potatoes to try to sell them. So that crop didn't work out, but I've always kind of had that spirit of kind of wanting to go do things, myself and go do things my own way. But yeah, as I kind of came up to the ranks, I wasn't a good student. I didn't follow a traditional path of, be a great student, go to college, do all those kinds of things. I ended up teaching myself computer programming and became a computer programmer, ended up landing out at Microsoft for a little while and down in the valley for a little while. But I always knew I had this entrepreneurial spirit and I always knew I wanted to be a leader. But once I finally got a few opportunities to lead, as you said in the intro, I kind of made every mistake in the book. I was not a good leader. I was not good at working through other people. I was too intent on having things done exactly the way I wanted to do them. So my journey became, I really felt stunted by my own inability to work through others and to lead. And that was really impacting the impact that I could have. I wanted to do big things. I wanted to really have a big impact on what I was doing, but my inability to lead was holding me back. So, long story short, after about 10 years of kind of flailing about as a bad leader, I figured out why and how, and I figured out kind of how to shortcut this. And that's really kind of my mission now, is to share those shortcuts. I call it an accelerator program, to share that with other people so that they can get past their own roadblocks about leadership and start becoming effective leading other people quickly. So that's really where I am today.
Awesome. So you mentioned a little bit of your early childhood. How many kids were in your family? What number are you?
So I'm number 2 of 2. I have an older brother who's 2 years older than I was, who's a little bit meaner. And, so we grew up, like I said, we were on a small farm in Kentucky. We had neighbors and some other kids around us, but it was always a mile or two bike ride to get to them. So a lot of times it was just me and my brother hanging out and doing things. So yeah, I think a lot of, I'm 51, so I'm a Gen Xer. So this was in the 70s and 80s. And, so we didn't have, both of my parents worked about 45 miles from home. So we were left running around the acreage and riding our bikes and doing all kind of stuff. But it was really, in a lot of ways, kind of isolating. So it was a good childhood, but not. I look at my brother now and all his nieces, and they're constantly running to sports and this and that and this and that and swimming and all these kinds of things. And it was nothing like that, right? That's not the childhood that we had. So it's definitely different than a lot of what I see today.
Sure. And who was the leader amongst you two? I just know for myself, I'm the 7th of 11 kids. And there was 2, me and a brother are really close in age. closer. I don't know that we're really closer than me and my younger sister, but we hung out all the time. And it often seemed that he was more of the follower and I was the leader, even though I was the younger one. And then I see it happening with my own little children. I have a 5-year-old son and an almost 3-year-old son, well, 4, almost 5 and 2, almost 3. And it's looking a lot like that same type of dynamic where the younger brother's actually the leader and the older brother's more of the follower. What was that dynamic in your family?
I think at times we both were. I mean, because obviously when I'm 7, I'm looking up, right? I'm adoring my older brother. I'm following him wherever he goes. It's more that kind of relationship. I think as we got a little bit older, I think, we kind of diverged a little bit and went different paths. And I think in some ways, I think in some ways he was, but yeah, in some ways I was definitely branching out and doing my own thing and trying to sometimes pull him along as well. So yeah, I don't think there's anything. I can't look back and say one of us was more dominant than the other all the time.
Okay, and so how did that affect though going into learning leadership skills? Do you feel like part of the stuff that you were failing at going as a self learning leadership the hard way, I don't know how else to put it, all right? Yeah. Failing over and over. Do you feel like a lot of those things that you were trying in a group setting, they maybe worked in a one-on-one setting or in a smaller setting, but then when you're looking into like actually becoming a leader of a group, the same tactics that you were using as a child are no longer working as an adult? Yeah.
So I think early on, I leaned heavily on my own competence. Right. So part of leadership is earning the trust and respect of your team. And there's a lot of different ways to earn the trust and respect of your team. And what I leaned on early a lot was my own competence, right? Respect me because I'm a great programmer, right? And that works okay in a small setting. But as the group gets bigger, it's hard for you to only have competence as your driver of trust and respect. You have to be able to do other things. So where I struggled, and really, when I look back kind of as my childhood, and even as I was thinking about it, is like I wasn't what I would consider a visionary leader. I wasn't laying out a vision and rallying 10 people to come together to do it. I was more that problem solver, bringing 1 or 2 people along through sheer will and through my own competence. And that works to a certain level. But as the problems get bigger and as you want to tackle bigger things, then that style of leadership doesn't work at all. And that's what I had to learn. Those are the huge mistakes that I made. So I think early on, like I look at some stuff I did like junior achievement in high school, right? Or just trying to get elected to a school leadership position, right? I had no vision, right? I had no idea how to kind of bring people to a cause. I was purely leading on competence.
Do you think that that's something that other kids in your high school, was it trained or did that style of leadership just come more naturally to them? Was it more environment that maybe they lived closer to their friends or family or they just had bigger families? So they had to learn the skills of influence and persuasion a lot more than just sheer will. Like what do you think separated you from other people in the beginning?
I think it's all of the above. I think part of it is nature, part of it is nurture. Like I'm an INTJ, I'm an introvert. And I know this now as an adult, like my personality type, I just struggle with people. People confuse me. Like I like rational things that like math, right? I was always good at math because, it's rational. People aren't rational. As much as economics, wanted to teach you that people are rational and you can predict what they're going to do, you can't, right? So there is a nature element of my personality that just struggles to understand people and struggles to understand what people want and how to bring them to your cause and how to bring them along, right? I just didn't understand that. But then also I think part of it was growing up, fairly isolated from other people. And I didn't have a lot of interactions outside the family. So I didn't have the opportunity to practice and learn and understand and some of those things. So I do think that some other elements of it was potentially just lack of exposure to people who were good role models, lack of, some of those things that I think also hampered me. So I think put those two things together. And I think that's largely why I struggled.
Yeah. I think that, or at least one of my beliefs is that as a human being, you're a leader to anybody who is in your sphere of influence, right? Anybody who is around you, you are leading them to do something. And you can say that in a lot of different ways. You're the average of the 5 people you hang out with. Your income is going to be the average of the income. but you can say it however you want, but ultimately influence is the people you're influencing. And by nature of influence, I think in that context, you could replace or synonymous with influence is leadership. And you get to determine what type of leader you want to be. Just because you're not the leader who has the title doesn't mean you're not the leader. Some of the best leaders in sports teams are not the team captains. They're not the people who are in the position of leadership. They're the people who show up and they're consistent and everybody recognizes, and just as you said, trusts and respects their example. So they don't even care who the actual captain is at some point. They just follow the person who they can trust is going to be consistent, and they can respect that. Even if they don't like them all the time, they'll follow them. So when would you say, because I know I understand isolation. I was homeschooled, so I had a big family, but I still grew up in a similar capacity where we didn't really have a lot of friends. And so we had to experience leadership in our family, but not necessarily in big groups. What would you say like your first experiences of leadership, and that could be just an influence in a group? How old were you when when you first became conscious that you were maybe leading other people or had that influence?
I mean, I tried in high school, but I can't say I really got anywhere, right? I mean, it's, there were things I tried to do that I look back on now and go, yeah, okay, I was trying, but I was not successful. Because again, I just didn't understand people. I think probably I went back to school when I was 23 and started working at the student newspaper at the University of Kentucky. And right as the internet was getting big and the web was coming out, I was very early computer programmer doing work in that area. And so again, through my competence, through this unique skill, then I became influential. I won some national awards that got me a lot of recognition and some of those kinds of things. So at that point, I think people beyond just, I'm fun. So, you get around fun people and, you have some influence in your group of friends just because you're a cut up or a fun person or whatever. But beyond just being a goofy person, I think that's the first time that I felt that I had any influence or that people were listening or paying attention to what I was doing for some reason other than maybe being the supervisor at the Circuit City. Like nobody really cares that you're the supervisor at Circuit City. You're not influential in that position. That's an authority position, not an influence position. So yeah, it was really probably I was in my mid-20s before I really felt like I had put myself in a position to be influential.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. And I think that's important to recognize, at least where did you start to where you're going. Something you mentioned a few times here, and so I want to call it out because there is I believe it's a false belief, just because when I look at all the best leaders that I know of, the best public speakers that I know of, the best influential people that I know of, very few of them are actually extroverts. Mm-hmm. Almost all of them. I mean, I can't think of any extroverts that I would say is an extrovert. Everybody I know is an introvert that I would look up to as a leader. I'm sure there's some extroverts though that are out there, but the majority is introverts. And there's this identity that people choose into when they say I'm an introvert, that they end up believing that because they're an introvert, they aren't a people person and thus they can't be a leader. And so kind of dissect that in your years of experience helping people become leaders and shortening that curve. How does understanding the strengths and weaknesses of both being an extrovert and introvert play into a style of leadership?
Yeah, so number one, both groups can be good leaders. But I do agree that introverts do tend to get overlooked sometimes. But where introverts can be extremely powerful is that they're often good listeners. They often will sit back and let other people be the stars and the other people on the stage, right? But it's the introvert who is observing and who is seeing, okay, person A is interested in this and person B is interested in this. And if I can help person A get that and I can help person B get this, then I'm going to be influential and they're going to help me get, it's not that transactional, but that's really what leadership is about, is being able to recognize I need to accomplish something. And to do that, I have to work through others. And the easiest way to work through others is to understand what they want and help them get what they want, right? But a lot of times what I see are the extroverts are so busy just out there doing the extrovert thing that they're not paying as much attention to other people. And so I think that that's one of the strengths of an introvert is they often can come off as more caring. They may be or may not be truly more caring. They tend to, it's, I think, easier to develop empathy. It's easier to develop emotional intelligence because they're used to being reflective. They're used to kind of sitting back and thinking about, or observing their own behaviors at times and recognizing when it may be good or bad. Right. So there's a lot of things that introverts are kind of uniquely, equipped to do that makes good leaders, right? Best leaders are they have empathy, they have great emotional intelligence, they care about other people, they're kind to other people, right? Those are all things that introverts can kind of pick up and do more quickly a lot of times than I think extroverts can.
And it's interesting. So previous to this conversation in the last 5 minutes, so I love when my mind is shifted, because I think that's how I grow. So one of the reasons I do this whole podcast so I can get better at life. Something I've noticed, and what I would have said right before this conversation, is that certain type, and I still think this is true. I'm just going to expound on in more detail now because I'm having my thoughts separated. But certain aspects of leadership come more easily to, in my experience, extroverted people. Oftentimes they have a more I don't know if magnetic is the right word, but magnetic personality. People want to be around them because there's always something going on, and there's like an inherent influence. And because that's a natural state for a lot of extroverted individuals that I know, then they don't have to put in as much work into becoming a great leader. It's like they have a lot of it there. So it's like, well, why do I need to go care more? People are coming whether I care about them or not. So, it's this type of perspective where I would say an introvert has to work harder on their skills to become a great leader. Based off of this conversation, I'm saying, okay, maybe not. Maybe they don't have to work harder. They actually have inherent skills, because I would agree with you that they're better listeners generally, for all the reasons you said. But maybe they actually have more of the inherent skills. They just don't understand how to get the attention. Like if they could figure out just the attention side, and it's not really the attention, like look at me, but get the attention around their movement, they could never be even heard of. You may not ever know their name, but if they can get the attention around their movement, figure out marketing, then maybe they become the bigger leaders than the extroverts.
Yeah, people go where the excitement is, right? That's just human nature, right? Like if there's noise and lights and excitement over there, then people want to go over there, right? But most introverts don't go over there. The introverts are sitting in the corner, by themselves reading a book. And so yeah, I think that element of attracting people to you, people naturally go where the excitement is. And so as a leader, then yeah, it can be easy to attract people to you. But then if you don't care about them, and if you're not helping them get what they want, then they're not going to stay. Right. They're either going to move on to the next exciting thing, or they're going to go someplace else. Right. And that's where I think an introvert, that once they can bring somebody into their sphere of influence, and if they're truly a caring leader and it's helping them as much as they're being helped, then that's where I think introvert leaders can keep people around longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I've never thought of it that way. So I'm glad that I had this conversation today. If there's nothing else, I just gained a new perspective and I appreciate it. Because I am more of an introvert, and it's something that I've struggled with. I do struggle with the marketing aspect of it. And so it's interesting. And I probably fell into the same habits you did, where it's like I have a high level of self-trust and self-ability to get stuff done. And so then when it goes to something you said in the beginning is working through others. And I want you to expound on that. Because that's something I don't think I'm very good at, honestly, right now. I think I could do a lot better at. I'm a very self-motivated person. Like I just do what I know needs to get done, and it doesn't make sense to me that people don't. That's where I'm like, the understanding of humans is like, why are you not motivated? Or if people get excited about little tiny incentives for like this $10 gift, I'm like, dude, you just do what you're supposed to do. You're going to make $3,000. Why do you care about a $10 gift? Like that doesn't make sense to me. Maybe because my value is more on the actual dollar amount of my own lifestyle than I'm worried about recognition. So it's an interesting dichotomy, but how did you what is the secret that you found to working through others and building somebody into your close-knit circle as an introvert leader?
Yeah, so I do think it starts, and I'll go to where I wasn't good initially, and that's the idea of a vision. Right. So again, leadership is working through others to get things done. There's things you need to get done, but you can't or don't want to do them yourself. So you choose to work through other people. Right. I'm just like you. I've got a website. I'm sitting here writing software that and I'm not going to hire it out because it would probably cost me $100,000 to hire it out. And I'm not going to hire that out. I would rather just do it myself and hire out something I'm not good at.
And then you know what you can change if you want to change it.
Exactly. Right. So yeah. So it's the idea of you're choosing to work through other people. Okay. And when you make that choice to work through other people, then you have to let go of some things, right? You have to let go of perfection, your version of perfection. You have to let go of exactly the way you would do it. And you have to start painting that vision of what is the outcome, right? Why are we doing this? Why is it important? What is this particular task or problem that needs to be solved? And then here's how we know we'll be successful. And then it's also knowing that you're never going to delegate perfectly on the first shot. Right. So it's learning how to turn them loose with pieces of it and then come back for check-in points, because they're going to learn and they're going to come back and teach you something. And based on what they teach you, you're going to have to change you're going to have to change the way you delegate it and what you're asking for. And then they're going to go do. So you have to recognize it's never going to be as efficient as if you did it yourself either. Right. That's the other piece of it, is that we want to delegate it and we want it done exactly the way we did it. And we want it done as efficiently as if we could have done it ourselves. Right. None of that's ever going to happen. So you just kind of have to learn to let go of those things. Right. But that is what leadership is. It's working through others to get things done. It's amplifying your impact beyond what you can do with your own two hands. Well, and it could be a movement. It could be a church. It could be a business. It could be your family. It could be a sports team, right? Everywhere you go, there's that need for leadership.
And I completely agree. That's one of the reasons I love this podcast and why I do it, is so many people think the word legacy is tied to money. And I just think it's not at all. That's like a sliver of an aspect of it. There's so many other areas of life that we can be remembered. Some of my favorite people are probably the brokest people, but they taught me the most about being a good father, being a good friend, being a good, and I will, like, some of them I would consider saved my life at different points in my teenage years. And they're not like super financially successful, but they were just good people and they do good things. They love their wives. They love their children. They cared about their friends, and they had a high identity, and that didn't always translate into money. I think that it's important that we separate leadership or legacy and how we're going to be remembered from a financial conversation, because that is, you could have a financial legacy if you wanted, but it doesn't necessarily happen all the time. So when we're talking about this, let go of perfection, that's difficult for me sometimes, but I do have a funny story about it. So I was on a LDS mission in Scotland and Ireland, and part of, I don't know how much you know about that culture, but part of that, the mission experience is you have new missionaries come in and they get trained by the old missionaries and so on, right? And one of the responsibilities is basically keeping a record of what you do every day, so that when a new person comes in, they know what's been done, they know where you're at, they know who you've talked to, who you haven't talked to, so they aren't wasting their time. And for the first 7 months, I was the one who updated it, and I got good at it, I thought. And so I was not always wanting the new kid on the block to be updating it, but then they never learned how. And eventually I let one of my trainees take over that responsibility, because there was just way too much for me to be doing, because I had risen in leadership. So I had other responsibilities, and that was one thing I just didn't have time to do anymore. And he was so much better than I was at it. It was not like, it wasn't even close comparison. He was so much better. And I was like, dang it, I should have learned to let that go a long time ago, because he was just so much better at it. So anyways, this is really interesting. Letting go of perfection. You think you're good at it. And so you think how you would do it is perfect until you let somebody else who, like, that's actually their strength do it. And then you're like, oh man, I should never do that again. That's no longer ever going to be my responsibility, because my perfect is like a level 2 out of 10 accomplishment. And I found that out even doing summer sales. I did summer sales and I was good in my company. I was at the top of my company for 2 or 3 years in a row, thought I was killing it. And then I quit that company, went and changed careers. And then I saw what was going on in the industry. And I was like doing a third or a fourth of what people in other teams were doing. I was like, oh, I'm not good at this at all. I should not be in this industry. So it's fascinating. How do you create effective check-ins though? Because one of the things that I've struggled with assistants and other team members is when I check in and I'm like, okay, clearly I didn't define what I was looking for good enough. So that's on me, right? I'm not mad at them. But then I redefine what I'm looking for, and it almost looks like you changed direction, Sam. I just invested 2 weeks or whatever into being good at what I thought you wanted. And then you're saying you didn't want any of that. You actually wanted something else. So I get the idea of like, give an instruction, let them go do it, and be more creative and more autonomy. But how do you then create check-ins and not feel like they were wasting their time? Or how did they feel like they weren't wasting their time?
Well, so I think there's a lot there, right? There's a lot there that we can unpack and a lot of different directions we can go. So I think you have to, number one, set the expectation at the outset that we're going to have check-in points. It's not going to be perfect. This is going to be a learning process, right? I don't know exactly what I'm asking for, right? I think this is the general direction that we're going to go, but I don't know, right? And that's really applicable in what are called, organic or routine, not organic or innovative situations, right? If you have a process for doing payroll every month, right? That's a mechanistic system that you can set the processes around and train somebody to do it and set expectations on how they do it, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one piece. But the bulk of the work and the bulk of the problem happens more on that innovative side, where you either don't have that process in place yet, or you're creating something new. You're doing something completely different. Like right now, I'm going through about 25 different ways to potentially market this business, right? I don't know which ones are going to work for me, right? So it's an exploratory process that we're walking down a path. We're not trying to get to a specific, we're trying to solve a particular problem. We're not trying to get to a specific point, right? So I think you have to set the stage at the very beginning to say, this is what we're going to do, right? So don't be upset in 2 weeks if we've learned something new and we change course and we pivot a little bit, because that's what innovative work looks like. Innovative work is not efficient. It's a ton of pivoting. The other thing I think you can do is that you can recognize that work goes through 6 steps, right? It's state the problem. It's define the standards and trade-offs. It's brainstorm options. It's choose an option. It's do the work. And then it's monitoring and adjusting. And it's to be able to say, where in the work process is this person on those steps? And then be able to say, look, this is, again, setting the expectation in the front. This is what we're going to go through. And here's where you are. And here's what we've learned. So we have to go back 2 or 3 steps because we just learned something. That's just the way it is, right? And I think the more you can have a process, even for the innovative work, then I think the more people can feel like they're on the journey with you. And they're not just strapped to the back of the bus going wherever, your whims take them this week,
Yeah. I mean, it's a healthy balance of both in my life right now. I have some, honestly, when I got my assistant, I finally committed, hey, I'm just going to pay you, do what I need you to do. I got like 4 hours of my day back first off, which was awesome. And it was amazing. And then I found myself just like in la la land, sitting, not doing much, still working, doing my income producing activities, but then spending the rest of the time with my family. And I had actually stopped working on my business because most of working on my business was administrative stuff. So I got rid of that. And I was like, oh, now what? So now I've recommitted to going back and actually started working on my business. But then it's interesting. Part of that is okay, well, what are now the standard operating procedures over the last 6 months? What have we created with my assistant so that if I need another assistant, I can have another assistant take that off and have her be more innovative with me and my innovation. Like an innovative assistant and then a monotony assistant to do both. But one of the things you mentioned as well is amplifying your impact. So when you use that term, what are you thinking of, and how do you hope that lands with the audience of people okay, if I'm sitting there listening to this thinking, I would love to amplify my impact. What do you mean by that? And what are 2 or 3 strategies that you found are maybe small? I don't know that I would say small, but we'll say small for a topic of conversation. Small changes in their leadership styles or things that they're doing with their team that might help them get the biggest amplification of their impact.
Yeah. So for me, what I mean is that there are things you want to do that you can't do with your own 2 hands. You just have to accept, there's a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right. If you want to do big things, you can't do it by yourself. If you want to be fast and efficient, do things by yourself. If you want to tackle my last executive role, I worked at a medical education company. We were trying to figure out how do we better educate the world's medical doctors. right? So technically, just the technical aspect of building platforms, education platforms, and those kinds of things was just far beyond what I could possibly do. But the impact that organization is going to have on better educating medical doctors around the world is massive. But I had to give up, right? I had to give up certain things that I love, right? I love programming. I love database design. I love doing a lot of this work, right? I got to give it up. Can't do it. Right. At a certain point, like when you've got maybe 2 or 3 people working with you, you can hang on to the things that you're really good at and delegate the things that you're not good at. But as you get up around 8, 10 people on your team, you have to start delegating the things that you love, the things that you're good at. And if you're unwilling to do that, then you're going to limit your impact. You're going to limit how big you can go. Right. So to me, it's really, there's not a right or wrong, right? I don't want people to feel like, oh, I've got to give up everything, right? There's not. I don't really ever see JumpCoach growing beyond maybe 10 people because there are things that I want to keep doing, but that doesn't mean that I can't impact a large body of people. It just means that we're going to do it in a different way that best meets the type of operation that I want to run. So there's no right or wrong to it, but you really have to recognize that you've got to give up control. You got to let other people be the heroes of the story, because that's what they're getting. That's their juice, right? That's what they get out of it. They helped you solve this problem. And you have to say the impact is going to be bigger if I can get out of the way and let them.
So what, I'm just curious at this point. I love the idea. I mean, I hate it, right? That's my selfishness that I hate it, but I love the statement, at least. It's something for me to chew on, but delegating what I love and what I'm good at. What do you then spend your time doing if you're delegating those things out? What are you spending the majority of your time doing at that point? Is it all just you're the idea man and you're not what you're good at and what you love is what you love of the implementation, and you have to get completely out of implementation and just be the idea man? Like what exactly are you spending your time doing as a leader when you've delegated off all the rest?
So what you're doing at that point are the hardest decisions, right? And the hardest relationships. So to me, if you're at a point where you are a vice president or you're a C-level or you're the owner of a company, right? The job at that point becomes, I can't do everything. We have more ideas than we have the ability to do well. Right? Go back to the education company, right? We were only working with doctors. We could also work with nurses. We could also work with dentists, right? But we had to make a hard strategic decision to say no, right? We can't do it all, right? So that's what a leader's job is once you get to that level, is to be able to sit back strategically and say, out of the 50 things that we could do, we have to pick one, right? And I'm going to make that hard call. And then I'm going to keep us focused on it. And that becomes our vision. And then it's also saying, who are the people that we need to work with outside of these walls that are going to help us? Who are our partners? Who are our key vendors? Those kinds of things. So to me, those are the things that at that level, leaders need to start thinking about beyond just the day-to-day grind of getting stuff done.
Oh man, this is a hard conversation. I like it. It's like beating me up a little bit. It's one of the things that although I think I'm, and maybe selfishly, I think I'm better than most, or I'm better than many. I don't know if I would say I'm better than most, but I'm better than many, but I still am like just scratching the surface of what I can do in a leadership role. And there's so many different ways to lead. I was talking to my wife actually about different styles of leadership. And this is maybe something you've experienced when you're in a leadership position. So one of the areas I worked on in leadership for a long time is rather than, how do I say this? So what I used to do is I used to say, this is the stated objective, and this is my idea of how we'll get it done. And then I would ask for my team's input. What I found was everybody was just like an echo chamber. Sam, you're great. That's a great idea. And I was like, this is stupid. I'm not growing. And I know I'm not right. I can't be right every time. So that's not working. So I listened to some podcast or some book, I forget what. And they're like, no, you speak last as the leader. I was like, okay, so let's try this. Here's the stated objective. How can we get there, right? And then I would shut up and I'd listen to my team. And I've gotten a lot better at that as far as, hey, this is the stated objective. What are your thoughts? How can we get there? So then I've gotten a lot more ideas from people. in there, my question is, in my mind, there's a few different styles of leadership. One is the commander, where they just like, hey, this is what's happening, get it done, no questions asked, and there's no feedback loop. It's just like, this is what's happening. And then there's the style of leader who allows open discussion, and sometimes they have competing. I think for me, I like to have competing people, personality stuff on my team. It can get heated at times, but it allows a safe zone for like conversation. And then there's maybe a third type where there's all of that's going on, but the leader's just not really there. He already had the mind made up before he did it, but he's just doing it just because that's what leaders do, you know? So how do you, in the, like, have you found that one style of leadership is more effective as far as growth goes? Well, let's start with that question. Have you found that a certain style of leadership in a team setting is more effective or not?
So I will say that there is a time and a place for everything, right? There's a time and a place for the authoritative command and control, right? It's often not when you would expect. It's often not at the level that you would expect, but there is a time and a place for authoritative command and control. I've personally found, especially in a modern workplace, especially with knowledge workers, that a servant leadership model is much, much, much better. That's really the foundation of what we coach and teach, is that, you can have anything you want if you help enough other people get what they want, right? So it's really about helping other people and putting other people's needs above your own. And through that, you get what you want. The most important thing, though, beyond styles, right, is this idea of the mindset. And there are, as we kind of grow and evolve and mature, we go through different attitudes, mindsets. What is our ego attached to? So most of us, at the point that, especially the entrepreneurs, our ego is often attached to, we're the experts, we're the ones who know how to get it done, we can get things done quickly and efficiently, yada, 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 right? They have to turn off that mindset and grow into what's called an achiever mindset, which is more about the outcomes, less about the how, right? So more important than style is this idea of leveling up your mindset. And there's a handful of things you can do to kind of accelerate that and speed it up. That's the core of our first coaching piece that we do, is to get people to start looking at the world through the eyes of a leader instead of the expert. And but there's a time and a place for all the styles.
That's interesting. Something that I've struggled with as a leader is potentially not, again, I don't even know how to say this, but basically, if I see somebody who's giving me feedback that's not where I want to be, then I just like, oh, that's good. Nah, and then I move on. I don't really accept it as information. Or if there's somebody who is not even performing as well as I am, then trying to tell me how to do my job. Like, I don't know that what I'm doing is right, but I know that what I'm doing is creating more than what you're doing. So then it's hard for me to accept that. And I don't know how much of it is ego. Probably a lot of it is ego, but it is, I'm curious, what's a way to still hear those things and consider them without like shifting into less activity? Because I get the achiever, it can be a negative concept, but at some point, money is what keeps a business alive. And so at some point, the achievement of we have our bank accounts full of money, that kind of has to be a guiding light, at least. That has to be part of the conversation. So how do you still take into these things under advisement without, because then if you ignore them, people are like, oh, well, you're just ignoring my ideas. I'm like, well, kind of, because they aren't making me more money. So I don't know.
Well, so a couple of things in there. Stepping back as a leader does not mean accepting subpar results, right? It doesn't mean accepting, but it may be less efficient, right? It may take you longer to get there. It may not be, maybe this group can't close 30% of sales. Maybe they're going to close 20% and you're just a freak, right? Scott, I was a 10X program. I can do in 2 weeks what it takes the average programmer 6 weeks to do. But I can't compare them to that, right? I have to say there were some things that you were great at that other people necessarily aren't. But you can't accept shirking and just not getting results. But it's really about being less concerned with the how and more concerned with that you're actually getting the results that you need. All right. So that's part of it. So that's really, to me, the achiever mindset is less about the how and more about the what's. I'm trying to remember the other part of your question there. There's another piece I was going to go to, but then I just rambled on and forgot where I was going to go.
Even that is, I mean, that's huge, understanding that we're less worrying about the what and the how. And I've played multiple hats as you do, as like a one-man band type business. You wear multiple hats. And that's another aspect where it's like, the E-Myth Revisited, I'm sure you've read that book, right? Where you go up and you're like, oh, I'm doing really good income, but then you have all this stuff and you got to take off one hat and go take care of everything. And then you're back. Oh crap. Now I got to produce again. And it's this roller coaster. And that's a difficult part of leadership. And then teaching somebody else to do what you're doing. And if you are just a freak, maybe I'm just a freak and I'm good at what I do, but then I don't know how to train somebody else to do what I do because they're never going to do what I'm doing. So then I have to, it's not necessarily perfect, but it's like, I have to accept that they are going to only that their best may not ever be my best, and that their best is still their best, and reward their best. Yeah, I don't know. But how do you tell what somebody's best is? Because I don't feel like I'm good at my job. That's the thing. That's the funny thing, is like, I don't feel like I'm good at what I'm doing. I just do it so much that I have succeeded. I failed more than the next guy, I guess. That's my belief about myself. So it's hard to see somebody who is unwilling to fail. Except,
again, I think you have to set out, what is somebody's job, right? What is somebody's job? What are the standards around the job? What are the expectations around the job, right? If you have a group of people working hard, giving their best effort, that are producing at a level X, and there's somebody doing it X plus 50%, you can't judge 8 people on the performance of that one person who's the outlier, right? So I think you have to just acknowledge, okay, look, maybe I was the outlier in some cases, but I can't put that pressure on other people and expect them to keep showing up every day happy.
Happy.
Yeah. So it's most people want to grow. People want to be challenged, right? They don't want impossible challenges. They don't want to come in next year doing something completely different than they were this year, right? But people typically, especially if you're hiring good people, aren't afraid of challenges, and they're not afraid of stretch goals. They need to be realistic. So don't be afraid to put those things in front of them. But if you've set the standards and somebody isn't performing and the standards are realistic, and you have some people being successful and some people not, that's just normal, right? You're going to see a top 20%, a bottom 20%, and you're just going to have to manage that accordingly. The bottom 20% are either going to go up, or maybe they're in the wrong role. Maybe they're doing the wrong kinds of things. Maybe you can move them someplace else, or you can help them find something else to go do.
I like it. So talk to us more about the JumpCoach movement that you're creating, because I think anybody who is new to leadership, right? Anybody who's new to leadership, and that's a whole nother conversation, right? Where you have a bunch of people who were tradesmen, for lack of a better word. They got good at a skill. They saw their boss making more than they are. So they're like, I'm going to go start my own company. And so now they've turned into quote unquote entrepreneurs, but they're really just small business owners who are trying to be successful, but they never learned leadership. They were just really good at a skill. And then they try and become leaders. So there's a lot of people who listen to my show that probably would fit into that. And I think really any parent, there's no parenting courses, or I shouldn't say there's none, but there's few, and it's not like core curriculum. So anybody who's had children needs to go through some type of leadership training just to learn about themselves and others. But what would that, what does that look like working with JumpCoach, and what's the process for you guys?
Yeah, so we work. Most of the people we work with is self-paced. They go through a course that we've created. It's an accelerator. It's basically a 12-part accelerator program that is actually only about 3.5, 4 hours of video lessons, but is meant to be done over a 12-week period or a 24-week period. Because what it does is it walks them through three phases. Phase 1 is that mindset piece. It's saying, I need to start looking at the world as through the lens of a leader, not through the lens of the expert, right? So I need to recognize emotional intelligence, when I'm responding well, when I'm not. Here are the areas that I do well. Here are the areas I need to grow. Right? It's adopting, a growth mindset. It's really understanding their own strengths and weaknesses. So it's really just we recommend they spend just 3 or 4. The first 3 or 4 parts are really just observing their world and recognizing how they're behaving and recognizing when they need to kind of level up their own thinking. Right? It's not skills. We teach very few skills in those first sections. It's really all about just understanding and seeing the world through the eyes of a leader. And then goes into the second phase, which is we built a scorecard. That's the other big thing that trips a lot of leaders up and tripped me up for a long time is I didn't understand all the nooks and crannies. It's such a big domain that there's tens of thousands of books, right? I mean, and there is that for a reason. But of the 100 topics within leadership, each leader needs about 30 different ones, but they need to be aware of the nooks and crannies. So we built a scorecard and an assessment tool. It takes about 10 minutes to go through the assessment tool. What that tool will do will help them recognize where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are as far as leadership. It'll help them see all the nooks and crannies so they can at least say, oh, I didn't even know I was supposed to be doing that, right? Or I'm spending way too much time over here, not enough time over here. But now that I see, it's kind of like a map of a city. Now you can go explore the whole city, right? So that's the second piece we do. And then the third piece is we teach them what we call wayfinding, which is essentially how do you get better over time, right? As your company grows, you as a leader need to adapt, right? So you're not going to sit through a 2-day workshop right now and in 3 years be the leader your team needs you to be, because you're going to need to be a different leader in 3 years than you are today. So you have to constantly adapt over time. So that's the third piece we teach is that adaptability piece. How do you recognize where I need to grow and then do the self-directed just-in-time learning to do it? So it's really those 3 phases. And like I said, it can be done either self-paced through a course or it can be done through coaching if people do prefer to work with a coach.
Awesome. And then in that scenario, do they reach out to you, go to your website? Like, how do they get a hold of you? Is there a screening call before who you let in, or just go on, buy the course online? And
yeah, you can go to jumpcoach.com and buy the course online. It's fairly low cost. I don't want to say how much it is because we're still playing with pricing. Right now it's $100, right? And I don't expect it to be, significantly more or less than that. I'm trying to keep it very accessible. I don't want to there's a cost barrier, right? Sure. There's a cost barrier and a time barrier. So what we really did is said, how do we strip as much cost out of this? How do we strip as much time out of this? But still get people to be effective as quickly as possible. So they can go there, and the course, like I said, is self-directed. They can just take the course, right? If they're interested in coaching, they can schedule a call, and we'll just walk them through what we typically do in coaching. And then if that's something they're interested in, great. If it's not, that's fine too. But yeah, we do a intro call and just kind of a 30-minute get to know people who are thinking about coaching.
Cool.
We do a lot of work with teams. So like like a typical customer, they may have 10 people and they're bringing in their first management team. So they're starting to hire other managers. So now I've got 2 or 3 managers that need to be thinking as leaders together. So what we do a lot of times is we'll coach that team, where we'll take the 3 or 4 people who are going to be the core management team, and we'll spend some time working with them through the system, but then also through the scorecard and some of the other pieces as well.
Awesome. Hey, I love it. I'm going to go get your course because it's something that I'm always looking to get better at. And mostly I'm excited for this leadership assessment tool. I have a job form.
Yeah, that tool is free. So if you go into free tools on our site, there's one called Leadership Assessment or Leadership Scorecard, and that's a free tool. So it's actually a very good learning tool.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'm super excited about this. So this is Legacy on Rapid Fire, 5 questions, 1 word, 1 sentence answers. You know the drill. So what do you believe right now is currently holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today?
Well, I'm an introvert. And what's holding me back is marketing and getting out there and getting to know people. And that's just the hardest thing for me to do. I love to sit back and build things more than I love to talk to people about them, but I don't love to find people to talk to. So it's really, that's the biggest thing that's holding me back. And that's where I have to spend the next 6 months really pushing myself out of that comfort zone.
Awesome. And what do you think the hardest thing you've ever accomplished has been?
I think probably the hardest thing was at 23. I was a non-traditional student. I wasn't a good student. I had some health problems in my early 20s. I ended up in the hospital for a while. And when I came out of there, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sell everything I own and I'm going to go back to school. So I sold everything I owned and I moved into a tiny apartment and I ate potatoes and ramen noodles for 2 years and taught myself programming. So it was really just that period of realization that I wasn't on the right track and I had to make some massive, massive changes to get on the right track. And I'm glad I did that.
Awesome. And what do you feel like is your greatest accomplishment to this point in your life?
That's really hard. I think the greatest accomplishment to me is that I've never stopped learning, and I've never given up on myself, and I've never given up on others. And I'm constantly striving to be better tomorrow than today. And I think that that's not a single accomplishment, but it's been a cascade, right? I think if you pin me down to one accomplishment, I built a really good team at the last company I was with. It was I was able to go in and build a team from scratch, and it was just a fantastic team. But I had good material to work with. When you're building systems to educate doctors, that's a good mission that you can really build a good team around. So that team was really fantastic.
Sure, I love it. And what is one secret habit, mindset, or behavior that you believe contributes the most to your success?
So I think the biggest thing I do is I recognize the ebb and flow of my energy, and I put the most important work when I'm best. So I do my best work early in the morning. So I put my most important work early in the morning, right? Some people, it used to be when I was in my 20s and 30s, I did my best work late at night. So I put my most important work late at night. So I think the one thing that's contributed is really recognizing my own ebbs and flows, and then putting the most important things when I'm at my best.
I think that's huge. Understanding your energy and when you're most effective and put the most important stuff there. Yeah. Huge. So what are two or three books you'd recommend to the Fuel Your Legacy audience?
So I think one of the most impactful on me is a book called Multipliers, which is by Liz Wiseman. And it really gets into some of these things about the mindset and how a person can be a great employee on one team and a terrible employee on another doing the exact same job. And she goes through story after story of people who, were great under one boss and terrible under another, because it's about the boss and it's about how they treat. I think another one is a book called First 90 Days by Michael Watkins, it kind of breaks down leadership and basically it's your first 90 days as a leader in a new role. It's what you need to be thinking about and doing. And it's a really good overview of some of the pieces in leadership. And it was influential on our scorecard. Third book I would have to say would be Essentialism by Greg McKeown, which is really getting clear on, again, I said, the hard job of a leader is to pick that one thing you want to go big on out of the 50 you could, right? And Essentialism is a book that I think helped me be more comfortable in that regard.
Yeah. I haven't read the first two, so those are going to have to go on my Audible list. But I did know that Essentialism is huge, and it helped me limit my focus quite a bit to just a few things that I really enjoy and that I do consistently now. So here's the final question, which is my favorite question. And I don't even know if you have children, so maybe this is just, a nieces and nephews type question, but in 100 years from now, or 6 generations, your great grandchildren or grandnieces and nephews, if they're sitting around a table discussing your life and the impact you had and the legacy you left, what would you want them to be saying about Scott Drake 6 generations from now?
So I think one thing I learned in my early 20s was the juice for me was to be enlightened and be entertained, right? I need both of those. I want to be enlightened. I want to be entertained. And I kind of made a point back then to say, you know what? I want to enlighten and entertain. I want to help. I want to continually learn and teach. I love to learn and teach, but I want to do it in a way that's not so stodgy and boring and dry, right? So it's really about, it's about the way of going about that constant curiosity and learning and teaching. But then it's also, I really hope that through the work at JumpCoach and through some other things that I can take. Leadership to me is such a huge skill. And the lack of leadership holds back so many ideas. And it's kind of one of those root problems that limits what we're doing as humans, right? And if we can fix it, if we can get people working better as leaders and working better together, then I think that it can really have a pretty significant impact. So I hope that some of the simplification that we do, some of the types of training that we do, some of the mindset shifts that we can help people make quickly. I hope that those are things that, if not still in use in 100 years, have influenced that next generation, right? That are teaching the next generation of leaders. So I hope to really be able to put a dent in this, because it's a big problem. And I think that that we can put a pretty big dent in some of the problems of the world if we can improve leadership and improve how we teach it.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. I love it. Hey, thank you so much for taking time today to share this and have this conversation with us. And if you guys are interested, I don't know why you wouldn't be interested, honestly, because this leadership applies to literally every aspect of your life. It's not about business, guys. It's about becoming a better human and reaching your full potential and living your legacy. And it starts with becoming a leader. So hopefully you all go to jumpcoach.com and take advantage of that 12-week course, or however long it takes you to get through it. But don't go through it so fast that you miss the actual growth, right? actually put it in practice and follow up and do your leadership assessment to find out where you're at. So thank you so much, Scott. And thank you. If you like this podcast, go rate it and leave a comment on, not on social media, on iTunes, and then share it on social media if you really like it and want other people to hear it. So catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy Show.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.